Adana was a young woman full of life, with a smile capable of brightening even the grayest days. In the small village where he lived, his laughter echoed like a melody that united the hearts of everyone around him. From a young age, she had taken on a special role in her mother, Equido's household. It wasn't just the responsibility to help, but the genuine love with which he took care of the tasks, always finding ways to transform simple moments into something special. That particular morning, Adana woke up excited, with a clear idea in mind, to prepare her mother's favorite dish, a gesture that she knew would warm Equido's heart, who had been visibly tired the last few days. The village was in its usual routine. Women sold fresh produce at the market, while men returned from their fishing trips. The smell of burning coal mixed with the aroma of spices created a welcoming, familiar atmosphere. Adana left with the basket in hand, saying goodbye to her twin sister, Nina, with the promise to return soon. "I won't be long. Save some energy, because tonight I'm going to need help in the kitchen," she said with a mischievous smile. Nina rolled her eyes and laughed, as she always did when faced with her sister's jokes. On the way to the market, Adana stopped to greet people she knew. She had the gift of creating bonds easily, and everyone in the village seemed enchanted by her kindness and joy. It was then that she met Emeka, a man who appeared to be a merchant from another region. He approached with a friendly look and a soft tone of voice. "You must be Adana, the famous daughter of Equido. I heard your hands in the kitchen are magical. I'm looking for talented young people to work on a special project in the big city. A unique opportunity to change your life." Adana, initially cautious, became enveloped by Emeka's well-articulated words. He seemed sincere, and the idea of helping his family with extra income flashed like a golden chance in his mind. "I don't know. My mother would never let me leave so suddenly, and my sister would be furious if I even considered this without consulting them," replied Adana, still hesitant. But Emeka, with his persuasive skills, assured that everything would be organized safely, that he would speak to Equido himself, and that it was an unmissable opportunity. Before he knew it, Adana was agreeing to meet with him later in the day to discuss further details. The hours passed, and night came bringing with it a light breeze, but no news from Adana. Nina started to get restless, pacing back and forth as Equido tried to calm her down. "She is responsible, daughter. She must have stopped to help someone or got caught up in some conversation. You know how Adana is," Equido said, although his tone betrayed the worry that was beginning to form in his chest. When the silence of the night completely settled in and Adana did not return, Equido's heart sank almost unbearably. The village, upon being alerted, mobilized immediately. All the neighbors came together, some carrying torches while others set up search parties. The paths to the market were searched, and the river banks, illuminated by the flickering light of the flames, became the scene of a desperate search. Voices calling Adana's name echoed in the darkness, but the only answer was the distant sound of insects and the whisper of wind through the trees. Nina, in turn, felt a mixture of fear and guilt. What if I had insisted on going with her? What if something had happened because I wasn't there? These thoughts consumed his mind as he tightly held Equido's hand. On the outside was trying to remain calm, but on the inside, he felt on the verge of despair. As the search progressed, clues to Adana's whereabouts became increasingly scarce. A trader mentioned seeing a young woman talking to a man outside, but was unable to provide further details. Uncertainty turned into anguish. The village, once peaceful and full of life, was filled with a heavy silence, full of doubts and fear. That night, Equido remained awake, sitting at the door of her house, waiting for a sign, whatever it was. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, while Nina, overcome by exhaustion, fell asleep in his arms. The distant sound of drums, played at a ceremony in the neighboring village, served as a cruel reminder that the world moved on, indifferent to the pain this mother and her daughter were experiencing. With the sunrise came the hope of new searches, but also the fear that Adana's disappearance was just the beginning of something much darker. Equido knew he would need all his strength to face what was to come, but deep down, one question kept coming to his mind. Why would my Adana, so full of life, so full of dreams, disappear like that, without leave traces? Dawn brought more questions than answers, and Nina, with her gaze fixed on the half-open door, felt her sister's absence like an emptiness that threatened to swallow her. The air of the village, once vibrant with voices and laughter, now felt heavy, filled with worried murmurs and looks of solidarity that failed to ease the anguish that was growing within her. With each passing minute, Adana's face became more vivid in his mind, as if his memory insisted on preserving the most striking details. The confident smile, the quick gestures, and that characteristic determination that the two always shared. But now, that determination was up to Nina alone. She knew she couldn't wait for luck or the intervention of others. If anyone was going to bring Adana back, it would be her. With her mind made up, Nina began her journey to the market, the last place Adana was seen. The morning was cool, but his breathing was heavy, carried by a mixture of fear and determination. As she passed by the vendors who were already setting up their stalls, she asked quick but direct questions, like someone who refused to waste time. "Did you see my sister yesterday?" asked a woman who was arranging baskets of cassava. "Did she come by with her shopping basket?" Most responded with negative gestures, others with vague phrases, but Nina didn't give up. Each refusal only strengthened his resolve to continue. Among the spice stalls, an elderly man called out to her. He seemed hesitant, but his tone had something urgent about it. "I heard someone mention a strange man who was here yesterday. He looked like a foreigner, not from here in the village. Maybe he saw something." Nina's heart beat faster. A stranger? This felt like a clue, but also a threat. Still, she needed to know more. Thanking the man, she continued asking the others, describing any details she could remember about what Adana might have said before leaving. It was then that he found a young woman from the neighboring village, sitting in the shade of a large tree with a distant and worried look on her face. Nina hesitated for a moment, but something in the girl's posture gave her courage. Approaching, she asked directly, "Did you see my sister yesterday? Or heard anything about her?" The girl, named Onyika, looked surprised but did not deny it. After a moment of silence, she said, her voice low and strained, "I heard about a man called Emeka. He approaches the girls, offers them work in distant places. But no one knows what happens next." The words seemed to poison the air around Nina. Emeka, a simple name, but one that now carried a devastating weight. Nina felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. Was it possible that this man had deceived Adana? She tried to compose herself, but her voice shook as she asked, "Do you know where I can find him? Or someone who can tell me more about him?" Onyika shook her head in fear. "People are afraid to talk about him. They say he doesn't act alone, and those who get involved disappear." The response was like a blow. Nina took a deep breath, trying to contain the panic that threatened to boil over. But the fear soon turned to anger. If there was someone behind her sister's disappearance, she wouldn't rest until she found them. Back home, Equido was sitting in the same place she had spent the night before, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Upon seeing Nina, she looked up, expecting to hear good news, but found only silence heavy with frustration. Nina, with a choked voice, told what she discovered. "There is a man, Emeka. He may be involved." Equido's reaction was immediate. "You can't go after him alone, Nina. He's dangerous. We don't know what could happen." But Nina, overcome by a strength she didn't even know she possessed, replied, "I have no choice, Mother. If we don't do anything, he will continue doing this to other girls. I can't wait here." That night was marked by alternating arguments and silence. While Equido tried to maintain hope that Adana could be found alive, Nina felt the urgency to act. Her mother's pain consumed her, but she knew the only way to alleviate that suffering was to confront the danger. In the early hours of the next morning, as the first rays of sunlight illuminated the village, Nina made a promise to herself. She would discover the truth, no matter the cost. Each step on his journey felt heavier than the last, but also more determined. The search for answers wasn't just about finding Adana. It was about facing fear, about fighting the injustice that threatened to destroy everything they knew. And, above all, it was about keeping alive the memory of the sister who had transformed every day of their lives into something special. With Emeka's name etched in his mind, Nina knew the path ahead would be perilous. But giving up was never an option. With each clue she found, her courage grew, even though fear was always lurking, like a shadow that never left her. Adana's disappearance was now a mystery that Nina was determined to solve, whatever the cost. Nina remained determined in her search, guided more by the strength of instinct than by any concrete clue. In the middle of his journey, he met Chibuzo, a young man with an easy smile and confident look, who introduced himself as someone willing to help. He appeared as a ray of hope at a time when answers seemed increasingly distant. "You're Adana's sister, right? I heard about what happened. I'm willing to help in any way possible." The words, though simple, carried a sincerity that Nina was desperate to believe. The pain of his lonely search felt a little lighter with the promise of support from someone so sure of himself. The days that followed were marked by long conversations between Nina and Chibuzo. He accompanied her to the market, asked people questions, and helped retrace Adana's steps. Over time, the initial distrust gave way to a bond that seemed genuine. He spoke passionately about his childhood in a distant village, his life experiences, and his desire to protect those he loved. "I know what it's like to lose someone important," he once said, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if the words brought back painful memories. For Nina, these conversations were a relief amid the chaos. For the first time since Adana's disappearance, she felt like she wasn't alone. However, Nina's mother, Iquido, looked at the situation from a different perspective. Something about Chibuzo bothered her. He was polite and helpful, but there was something about his gestures that seemed calculated, as if he was always paying attention to every word he said. "You trust him too quickly, Nina. We don't know who he really is." These words echoed in Nina's mind, but she refused to let doubt interfere. "He's helping me, Mom. It's more than anyone else has done so far." Iquido, however, could not ignore his intuition. During a casual conversation with neighbors, he heard mention that Chibuzo was known to run in the same circles as Emeka, the man suspected of taking Adana. The news was like a blow. She felt the urgent need to protect her daughter, but knew that confronting Nina directly could push her further away. He decided to investigate on his own, gathering fragments of stories that could confirm his suspicions. Meanwhile, Nina began to notice subtle changes in Chibuzo's behavior. Whenever she asked more direct questions about Adana's disappearance, he would look away or quickly change the subject. "Maybe you should get some rest," he suggested in a tone that seemed more like an attempt to distract than to care. These moments planted seeds of doubt, but Nina refused to believe that someone who seemed so willing to help could be linked to her sister's disappearance. One day, as they were returning from the market, Nina asked directly, "Have you heard of Emeka? People say he had something to do with my sister's disappearance." Chibuzo hesitated before answering. "People talk a lot. Not everything is true. I heard about him, but I never met him." The answer seemed simple, but the defensive tone and the look away awakened something inside Nina. She began to remember moments when Chibuzo seemed to know more than he was letting on, questions he avoided, and stories that seemed carefully chosen. Iquido, in turn, confronted Nina with the information he had discovered. "He is not who he says he is, daughter. I know you want to believe the best in people, but sometimes that can blind us to danger." Nina, however, was not ready to accept the possibility that someone she trusted could be a threat. "You're wrong, Mom. He just wants to help. I can't afford to lose the only person who truly cares." Tension between mother and daughter grew as doubts about Chibuzo grew. Nina, torn between her mother's intuition and her own need to trust someone, began to observe Chibuzo more closely. Every word, every gesture seemed loaded with a hidden meaning. If he's lying, she thought, but the idea was unbearable. Deep down, Nina knew she needed the truth, but she feared what it might reveal. The fragile bond she had created with Chibuzo was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The shadow of doubt grew, and Nina felt he was about to discover something that would change everything. The morning seemed ordinary, but there was something different in the air. Nina woke up with an inexplicable feeling, a weight in her chest that had been with her since the previous night. As she prepared to face another day of fruitless searches, she found something unusual on the door of the house. An envelope. It was folded sloppily, with dirt marks on it, as if it had been left hastily. Nina's heart skipped a beat. His hands shook as he opened the letter, and as he read the first words, he felt the ground open beneath his feet. The text was brief but devastating. Adana had been taken by Emeka and her group, involved in a cruel human trafficking scheme. Escape attempts, the letter said, were severely punished. Adana had challenged the scheme, but could not withstand the brutal consequences. Nina could barely process the contents of the letter. The words danced before his eyes, but the cruel meaning was clear. She fell to her knees, gripping the paper tightly as silent tears streamed down her face. The world seemed to have lost its color and sound. The image of Adana, so full of life, appeared in his mind, mixing with the horror of the reality described. Equido, hearing his daughter's sobs, ran to her. As he read the letter, his legs weakened, and a scream of pain broke the silence of the morning. The certainty of Adana's fate was more than they could bear. The initial pain soon gave way to something deeper inside Nina. A fire began to burn in his heart. Adana's loss would not be in vain. She would use this cruel truth to seek justice, even if it put her own life at risk. Nina knew the letter was not just a revelation, but also a clue. Someone knew more than they were willing to say. Someone, somewhere, wanted her to know what happened and, perhaps, even where to look. As he processed this information, Nina began to realize that Chibozo could be more useful than he realized. Despite growing suspicions about his connection to Emeka, he had previously mentioned details about the locations where Emeka operated. In previous meetings, Chibozo had spoken of a warehouse in a nearby village, which he had casually described as a meeting place for not very trustworthy people. At the time, the information seemed irrelevant, but now it made sense. Having made up her mind, Nina directly confronted Chibozo. "You know more about Emeka than you're saying, don't you? If you really want to help me, tell me where to find you." Chibozo hesitated. His expression changed, revealing an inner conflict he couldn't hide. "I don't know if I can. This is dangerous, Nina. They're not ordinary people. If they distrust me, I will be lost." But Nina's gaze did not waver. "You are already involved in this, and if you don't do the right thing now, you will never have peace. Adana deserves justice." Nina's words, filled with pain and determination, pierced Chibozo's resistance. After a long moment of silence, he finally relented. "There is a place, a warehouse. That's where they usually take people. But you can't go alone. It's too dangerous." Even with Chibozo's warning, Nina knew he could not back down. The warehouse was the most concrete lead she had since the beginning of her search, and she wouldn't let fear stop her from taking action. However, Chibozo still kept secrets. He seemed to know more than he was willing to reveal, and his every hesitation made Nina question how much she could trust him. Still, she used every scrap of information he provided to piece together the puzzle. That night, Nina sat down with Equido to share what he had discovered. The mother, still devastated by the loss of Adana, initially begged Nina to give up her quest for justice. "I've already lost a daughter. I can't lose you too," Equido said, his voice breaking. But Nina responded firmly, "It's not just about Adana, mother. It's about all the girls who can still be saved. I need to do this." Revealing the scheme was a heavy burden, but also a source of motivation. Nina knew that what she was facing was greater than her own pain. It was a web of cruelty that destroyed lives, and she was determined to stop it. With Chibozo's information and the anonymous letter in hand, Nina hatched his plan. Even with the constant fear and the pulsing pain in her heart, she felt like she was closer to the truth. The path ahead was dangerous and uncertain, but Nina knew that, to honor her sister's memory, she could not stop. With each step, she prepared to face a world darker than she had ever imagined, while Adana's name echoed as a constant reminder of why this fight was necessary. The night was cold, and the silence was interrupted only by the distant sound of branches being dragged by the wind. Nina was nervous, but her determination was unwavering. At his side was Captain Okachukwu, a retired military man known for his courage and the respect he had earned in the village. He had heard about Adana's disappearance and the scheme that Emika was running, and, seeing Nina's strength, decided to join her in the search for justice. "They don't expect us to fight," he said firmly, "but we will show that they underestimated the wrong people." The plan was bold, almost suicidal. With the information obtained from Chibuzzo and the confirmed suspicions about the warehouse, the group prepared to invade the place. It was a large warehouse, abandoned in appearance, but with clear signs of recent movement. Dim lights escaped through the boarded windows, and the muffled sound of male voices indicated that there were more people than expected. Okechukwu had mobilized a small group of men from the village, all willing to risk their lives to put an end to the horror that Emika was spreading. Each of them carried makeshift tools, but what they lacked in weapons they made up for in courage. Nena felt her heart racing as the moment approached. With every step, he remembered Adana's smile and the emptiness that her absence had left. That memory gave her legs strength, even when fear threatened to paralyze her. As they watched the warehouse from a distance, Okechukwu hatched the final plan. "We need to distract them. 2 of us will enter through the back, while the others block the main exit. Nena, you stay here." But she didn't accept it. "I can't wait here while they face these monsters. Adana deserves me to fight for her." The men advanced cautiously, but a snap of a dry branch revealed their positions sooner than expected. The voices inside the warehouse stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of chairs being dragged. Emika appeared at the door, his gaze cold and calculating. "Who dares to interfere in my affairs?" The tension was palpable. Nena, hidden in the shadows, could hear the arrogance in his voice, as if he believed nothing could stop him. But this time he was wrong. The confrontation was quick and chaotic. Emika's accomplices tried to fight back, but the determination of Okechukwa's group was relentless. Amidst the confusion, Nena saw an opportunity and advanced towards Emika, who was trying to escape through the side of the shed. "You're not going anywhere." Her voice echoed with a strength that surprised even herself. Emika stopped, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and contempt. "Do you think you can stop me, girl?" But Nena did not back down. "You destroyed my family. Today, that ends." As the confrontation intensified, Chibuzzo appeared. He had followed the group, but his presence was not at all welcome. The look in Okechukwa's eyes revealed that he knew more about Chibuzzo's betrayal than he had let on. When confronted, Chibuzzo tried to justify himself. "I had no choice. They threatened me. I just wanted to survive." But his words were empty given what was at stake. Nena felt anger rising within her. "You knew what they did. You knew what happened to my sister. And yet you chose to remain silent." The sound of quick footsteps brought everyone back to reality. Emika tried to escape again, but this time he was intercepted by Okechukwu, who knocked him down with a sharp blow. The leader of the scheme was immobilized, and his accomplices were surrendered. The warehouse, now silent, was a testament to the courage of a village that refused to accept cruelty as its fate. When everything seemed resolved, Nena entered the warehouse, driven by a visceral need to understand. The space was cold and gloomy, with chairs and ropes scattered across the floor. Every detail reinforced the horror that had occurred there. The walls seemed to whisper the stories of suffering they had witnessed, and the weight of it almost broke Nena. But she knew she couldn't break down. Adana would not be there to embrace her, but her spirit would live on in every step taken toward justice. Emika's capture brought momentary relief, but it did not erase the pain. The void left by Adana was an open wound that not even time seemed capable of healing. As the first rays of the sun appeared over the horizon, Nena and Equido hugged each other in silence, sharing a pain that words could not express. Despite everything, there was strength in her tears, a silent promise that Adana's memory would never be forgotten. The days following the confrontation were long and silent. The village, once full of laughter and sounds of life, seemed to have entered a collective mourning. For Equido and Nena, the void left by Adana was like a shadow that hovered over the house, reminding them at every moment of the absence of their contagious joy. The nights were even more difficult. The silence amplified the pain, while the dreams brought fragments of Adana's memories, which seemed as real as they were unbearable upon awakening. Despite her sadness, Nina found strength in her sister's legacy. She knew she needed to move forward, not just for herself, but for everything Adana stood for. It was on one of these days of silent mourning that Equido and Nina met Obiagelu, a man with a calm voice and compassionate gaze who arrived in the village as a stranger, but quickly became a friend. He was known for helping communities that had faced loss and trauma, bringing not just words of comfort, but concrete actions that transformed lives. Upon learning of Adana's story, Obiagelu felt compelled to support the family. "You've been through a lot, but I believe you can find strength again. Let's rebuild together." His words brought hope that had long seemed lost. Obiagelu began helping by rebuilding not only the family's home, but also their confidence in the future. He led a group of volunteers from the village, bringing materials, rearranging the space, and, most importantly, creating an environment that welcomed the pain but also allowed for healing. During this process, he realized the potential of Nina, who, despite her pain, demonstrated unusual strength and a burning desire to make a difference. "You have something special, Nina. Adana lives through your courage. I want to help you move beyond this village. I want you to have the tools to transform your pain into change." With Obiagelu's support, Nina began studying in a neighboring town. He financed her classes and encouraged her to learn not only basic subjects, but also topics that could directly impact her village, such as community safety and human rights. Each trip to the city was marked by a mixture of anxiety and determination. For Nina, every page turned in her books was a tribute to the sister she had lost, a way to ensure that no one else would have to suffer the same fate. Meanwhile, in the village, Equido began to open up more to the people around him. Once reserved and overwhelmed by the tragedy, she found comfort in the stories of other women who had faced similar losses. Together, they began to build a support network, sharing experiences and working to protect their families. Under Obiagelu's leadership, this network expanded, bringing lectures and meetings that made families aware of the dangers that were often disguised as promises. Inspired by what she learned, Nina decided to start a campaign that drew attention to the dangers of blindly trusting strangers. She created posters and organized community meetings, using her own story as a powerful wake-up call. "My sister believed the words of a man who promised a better future. That promise was the beginning of a tragedy. We need to be vigilant. We need to protect each other." His words echoed throughout the village, touching hearts and changing mentalities. The impact of Nina and Obiagelu's work went beyond the village's borders. Other communities began asking for help to implement similar initiatives. Obiagelu and Nina traveled together, carrying the message that unity and community vigilance were essential to protect the most vulnerable. Each new village visited was an opportunity to turn pain into hope, to ensure that Adana's memory lived on as a force for good. However, even in the midst of so many achievements, the void left by Adana remained. At night, when work was done and the village returned to silence, Equido and Nina still felt their sister's absence. But instead of being a paralyzing pain, it became a reminder of why they kept fighting. Adana is not here, but she left us something precious. The courage to fight for a better future, Equido said, holding Nina's hand as they looked at the stars. Adana's legacy was not just the memory of her life, but the impact of her story. The pain of their loss turned into a movement that saved lives, educated and strengthened communities. Obiagelu, who remained a pillar in their lives, summed up the sentiment in one of his conversations with Nina. "What started as tragedy has become something greater. You have turned darkness into light, and that light will continue to shine no matter what." Adana's story has become a symbol of resistance and hope. His absence was felt, but his spirit was present in every action, in every transformed life. Equido, Nina, and Obiagelu knew there was still a lot to do, but they also knew that together they could face any challenge. Adana may no longer be among them, but her strength continued to guide her steps, like a star that never goes out. If you enjoyed this video, please help us grow by subscribing to this humble channel. And if you'd like to watch more videos like this, we prepared the next video especially for you. Click here to watch.